Great, and we'll record on the computer.
Recording in progress.
I do like using the Zoom for the recording. I think because the nice thing is you can share your screen, people can see it when you post it online too. So, but I don't know if we'll have to do that tonight. We'll see. I'll keep an eye out too. You can keep an eye out, see if anyone pops in while we're talking. That would help because I may not look over all the time. But welcome again to Body of the Father. This is again an open topic. The questions are based on what you give. I'm just here, so I'm going to try to answer the best of my abilities. And if I don't know, I'll write it down and I will answer either on the comment section, YouTube or Facebook later. Or I will contact the person to ask the question directly, which I'm known to do that too.
I had a situation recently. I went to a funeral, relative's funeral, and was sitting next to my elderly cousin who walked with a cane, and when it got time for communion, she asked me if I would bring her the host.
Sure.
And I said, I'll ask the Eucharistic minister to come by and do that.
Good.
So that's what I did.
Good.
So
Good.
I didn't think would be proper for me to be walking around with the host. Nobody knew me from Adam.
Yeah,
I mean,
and that was the right thing to do because now if you had a Pix with you,
right.
Maybe,
right,
maybe.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. We just had our ministry day last Saturday, right? And I think what a lot of people don't necessarily realize that when it comes to extraordinary ministers, people that bring communion to the sick, those that maybe do simple repose or exposition of the Blessed Sacrament, help out at Mass, those names all go to the Archdiocese, right? So if you're an Eucharistic minister here at St. Gabriel, that means you're authorized anywhere within the Archdiocese to actually do extraordinary ministry of the Eucharist. Now, not every pastor may know that. And so it was prudent, I think, in that respect to say, let's get someone who is in the parish that's known to go do that. That'd actually probably be a better thing to do.
This was Belleville Diocese.
Yeah. So in that case, you wouldn't be. Right? So that's outside the territory. Even though you're trained, you probably could. And you could be what they call deputed to do that for at least, on occasion. There's something in the law that states the pastor or priest can actually depute anybody based on necessity to be extraordinary minister at the time. But all the names that we have are St. Gabriel go to the Archdiocese. So yeah, Belleville's different. So yeah, if you're outside the Archdiocese, you probably would best to get someone in the parish to go do that. And usually they have that set up. Like they usually have a spot, or they'll have the priest and minister go out to those who are can't move as well to bring the communion anyway. So regardless, you should be covered. But yeah, that's good. That's good theme. Yeah. Excellent. Great.
Remind me once again the difference between a nun and a sister.
Great. So a nun, properly speaking, is a woman in consecrated life who is cloistered, meaning they spend all their time in the community praying, right? Their charism, their main act of their ministry is to pray for priests and other religious and the people and the world and these other things. That's their driving charism. A sister is also someone in a religious life, consecrated life, but they have more of a for lack of a better term, practical ministry in the world. So maybe they teach, or they work in hospitals, or they work in maybe the parish administrator or something, right? So sisters are more like kind of doing things in the world. Nuns are more cloistered.
Like Sister Gail.
Sister Gail is a sister, right? Sister Anne Francis, sister. So the male version of that would be brother monk, or monk brother. Monk is someone who actually stays in a cloistered community, in a monastery. Their job is to pray. Typically they could be priests, but maybe not. Monks, properly speaking, would not necessarily be priests. But then you have brothers who are actually like the Christian brothers, like their charism to teach. Even though there are not too many of them here at St. Lucy anymore, that's what they're consecrated to go do.
We use that word so loosely, though. I mean, the nuns from,
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, because it's more there's more stance will use more in parlance, right? So I mean, but there is a distinction between them.
It's the first time I ever heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and that's I mean, because part of that could be because there's so few. They tend to wax and wane, and so it's usually when you have maybe more sisters more than you have nuns, but there's such a relationship. They're both, I think, because they're also both consecrated. They're vocations in themselves. They're consecrated life. They are consecrated by a bishop to go do those things. And the vows are the same. So the vows that a sister would take would be the same that a vows what a nun would take. But the charisms, the missions of those two people are different. And that's
Christian brothers are not ordained priests, correct?
No, Christian brothers actually it's in their constitution that they are not allowed to be ordained priests. They stay brothers. Now that doesn't mean a man can't leave the order.
Sure.
And we have I don't know if you guys know Monsignor Michael Witt, who's the pastor at All Saints in New City. He's a great historian. Actually, he's written a great history of the archdiocese and still continue to write. I think he's on his fourth volume now. But he was a Christian brother. Then he left the order and became ordained, and now he's a Monsignor and pastor. But yeah, brothers don't become priests.
So they have to leave their order.
In the Christian brothers, they would have to.
Okay.
But let's say like Jesuits, right? Jesuits have brothers, right? That may stay brothers, but they could also go on to higher orders too if they so feel called to do that.
Friars as well.
I'm sorry?
Friars as well.
Well, friars and brothers are friars is kind of more a colloquial term for monk, right? So like within an order, let's say like in the Dominicans, they would call themselves friars, regardless. As long as they've made vows to the order, they're therefore friars, brothers. But they're the same, friar, brothers, same. It's just Latin version of brother.
But some of them can be priests.
Yes, and that's what makes it somewhat confusing because Father Steve who's here, right?
Yeah.
When Father Steve when he was in the prior, if he goes to the prior over there on Louisiana, right, Lafayette, they don't call each other father or deacon. It's just brother, regardless if you're a priest, deacon, or brother.
When they refer to each other.
Refer to each other, right? Or even outside, like they were here. Let's say if Father Steve had another Dominican brother with him, he wouldn't call him Father Steve. Probably, he would call him Brother Steve. Because within the order, there's always that identity, and that's kind of the difference between someone who would discern archdiocesan priesthood and then a religious order. Because a woman or man who's discerning religious life, they have to discern the order first. That's the proper way to do it. So in other words, a man who wants to become a priest, there's different ways you can go about doing that to become a priest, but it takes a special charism to actually discern the order. And so they should discern the order prior before actually discerning the priesthood.
Like the Jesuits.
Like the Jesuits.
Which takes forever for them to be ordained.
It's 11 years of formation for a Jesuit. Start to finish. That also requires, the Jesuits also require an advanced degree. So you have to get a doctorate before you're even ordained. Right. Or I should say you're a doctor before you actually, Jesuits are a little bit different. God, we're getting into the weeds on this one. Jesuits, you can become a priest in the Jesuit order before you become a Jesuit.
Okay.
It's a very odd scenario. In most other orders, it's the complete opposite. You discern the order first. Typically, you take first vows in the Jesuit order, and then you would be eligible to actually receive holy orders before you actually take final vows within the order. So that's a little different. Most other places like Benedictines, Dominicans, Franciscans, you take final vows in the order first and become a brother or a sister, depending, right? And then if you feel called, you can then go for orders. But you always discern the order first before you actually go to the priesthood or anything else.
And you're just an archdiocesan priest?
Mm-hmm.
There's no
No, I'm not a religious. I am not a religious priest. That's hard to say.
Are the Father Steves of the world and what are they? It's St. Anthony. What are they?
Franciscans. Yeah.
It's sort of territorial, isn't it? A lot of Father Steve's people are all from. They seem like they're from the Great Lakes area and further east.
Well, see, that's one thing.
Depends on where everything's at, right?
Well, yeah, the orders are a little different too because they're not necessarily. Yeah, so there's not necessarily a diocesan territory that an order is actually over, right? They're in more general spaces.
But a guy from Arizona who wants to be ordained, he might not even know the Franciscans exist
Well,
unless he studies
right.
it, right?
Yes, but also too, even someone from Arizona doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be staying in Arizona if they
Right.
order a order. They could be going to Peru or to Japan or to the Northeast. So the orders are more global,
Okay.
where you can actually go, and that depends. I think it depends primarily on the need. I'm not an expert when it comes to orders because I'm not a part of one, but I know that from my talking to other people in relation to orders, people discerning those orders, typically the provincial is the one who kind of decides that, and it's usually based on the need. Now, I guess you could say maybe provincial doesn't like you very much. He may not necessarily put you in some place that may be necessary. I don't know. So there's a lot of politics even within order sometimes when it comes to these things.
But some of them don't even have presence in certain areas.
Yeah, so so like here, St. Louis, like for the Franciscans, is considered to be kind of a hub, right? It's kind of a centralized location, right? San Antonio, Padua.
And the Aquinas Center's made the Dominicans a little more.
It is, but even that's that was actually the generosity of the Jesuits.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah, so that land actually was owned by the Jesuits. They gave them to the Dominicans to have their prior, which is nice. It's very kind of them. Even though there's a lot of history with those two orders that go back and forth, so it's kind of fun to see those things. But yeah, the orders, that's the thing. Your orders are really more global, and you're really going to where you're needed. And first off, you're discerning the charism of the order. Then you're entered into the order, and then possibly if you feel called, or if the provincial need, that's the other thing too. If they need it, because the provincials also, the order itself has a say in whether you become a priest or not too. And they may say, we need more brothers to stay there.
Has anybody studied, like, why, like, obviously we're really down on people of being ordained,
Mm-hmm.
but has anybody studied why, like, the Christian Brothers are basically null and void, and
Well, I mean,
why some people stay archdiocesan priests?
yeah, I can't say if there's been.
Sure.
I know there's been surveys. There's been things like that. Scientifically study. I don't know if there's been like a deep dive in as far as like all the minutia. I think there is actually a correlation, maybe even causation, depending on how you look at it. That as go the religious orders, specifically the women orders, so goes the priesthood. And people may ask, like, why is that? Why would that? Doesn't make any sense. Why would that be, right? I mean, if you have women religious, why would that affect the priesthood? Well, you think about who prays for the priests on a regular basis. Who prays for those vocations?
The nuns.
Yeah, it's religious orders. And so if they're declining, well, of course the priest is going to
But
decline.
I think it's some of it has to do with, like, now they're actually, don't the kids like go to like a 1 or 2 day thing to sort of get introduced to it? We were never introduced to it. It seems like there was a whole big gap of lack of stewardship in it.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. And that's the other thing too, Jamie. I think anyone who's gone to a private Catholic school over the last 20 years, I will say, going to Christian Brothers College,
No.
I was never asked one time by a brother if I ever thought about becoming a brother.
Right, it's unbelievable.
I mean, even in grade school, you can even say, like, I think I maybe started discerning the priesthood because I had an experience of priesthood that was very positive. But I don't know if I was ever actually asked specifically directly in grade school if I ever thought about it. Maybe I was. I mean, it's hard to go back that far. But I think what we're seeing a lot of these. I mean, you hear about this in DeSmet and in SLU. You hear about this at the Priory. You hear about this about the women orders too, like in Viz and St. Joe's. They're not being asked.
It's
And if you're not being,
unbelievable to me.
well, if you're not being asked, then how are you even going to think about it?
I was a knight for a while, and they acted like that was our primary mission to encourage the vocation.
The Knights are very good about that, and I think part of that is just like kind of their interaction with the parish level, right? But the Knights also are not just necessarily promote their vocation in general, not just the priesthood, which is good. We need both. But I think that's I think if you look at the main cause is that why men are not entering the seminary and why women aren't entering the convents is they're not being asked.
I asked Gabriella the other day.
Good, do that.
She said she didn't throw it off the table.
And see, I think that's the point. Like I usually when servers, I ask them at least once a year. Have you thought about it? Or maybe, and if someone really seems like they're interested, like, hey, we got this thing at the seminary coming up with the, they have this thing over the summer, kind of Glenda days or vacation retreats, or the women usually have that they rotate through the different orders in the area. But see, I think part of that too is there's a level of understanding about particular orders. Part of that is the charism. So, particularly for our women, that they really have to discern the charism. And I think the problem with that is we've seen over these last few decades, there's been a change in the orders about what their charism is. So a lot of people throw out like, well, the reason why some of these orders are dying is because women aren't wearing the habits anymore. Well, that's not really it. That may be an external evidence of something going on internally. What you find happening with these orders that are dying, whether it be Christian Brothers here in St. Louis or all these religious orders, their charism has not been consistent. So in other words, certain orders were founded here came to St. Louis because they were dedicated to teaching the poor or dedicated to work in hospitals, right? That was their charism. That's what their order was founded on. Well, now you see women and even men in these orders that are maybe doing like parish administration, or maybe they're doing more, poor outreach, which isn't necessarily bad, but there's another order for that. That's not part of your charism. So if I'm a young person and I'm coming into maybe thinking about religious life, and I'm looking around and saying, okay, what are the orders I have here? Well, this order was founded to actually teach children, but now they're working in hospitals. Well, this order here was maintained to actually provide for the poor, but now they're working in schools. So the problem, I think, and this is Father Mark saying this, there's no data to back this up, maybe some, but I think the problem is with the charisms of these orders.
They're overlapping.
What's that?
They're fighting each other.
Well, it's not even that.
Subconsciously.
It's more one of these things. More from a personal standpoint, if I'm discerning charism, my question needs to be, what is the charism? And if 20 years ago the charism was this, but now it's this, what does that mean for me for 20 years from now?
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So if I really have a desire to do this, but maybe that might not be there because they haven't done that in a while, or they may change to something else coming down the pike, that's a problem. Now the church's response to that would be, well, if the charism is no longer necessary, that order should either leave or find other places to go do that charism, and then maybe let another order develop from that to actually provide for that. But they shouldn't be the same order. In other words, let's say if an order came here to help teach in schools, but they notice, we need to really start providing provisions for the homeless. That could really help. Okay, well, how about you take a group of sisters, develop their own order out of that to go do that, and now that's their charism. But that'd be a separate order entirely, with their own separate vocations, own separate discernment process.
I think it's the stewardship, and they're not being asked. No one's being asked. And then I think the poor nuns are in survival mode, just to financially be stable.
But see, I think this is a deeper question. The reason that these nuns are in survival mode is because, what was your charism originally?
Oh, yes.
And what is it now? Right.
And so they don't have a market.
Right.
To say, hey, this is what we do. Please donate to us.
Right. I mean, so it's not just one factor, I'm sure. Yeah, I think part of it, you're absolutely right. Part of it is there's not people being asked to do these things. No one's being invited to do these things. And you would imagine with an archdiocese, with the amount of schools we have with these orders involved, the fact we're not teaming vocations is sickening. It's sickening.
Nuts.
It's sickening.
Because we got the Daughters of St. Paul. We got the most precious. The St. Elizabeth nuns are like. I coached there for a while, and when they closed, it's the mother house is out there.
Yeah.
What are they doing?
Yeah.
And we got Notre Dame.
Well, yeah, they're not the only ones. We have plenty of orders around here that their median age right now is in the 80s, and it's not getting any better.
I think the Apostles of Sacred Heart have kept their charism of education.
Yeah, they do. They do well.
And that's the thing. They've been successful in their vocation because they have been.
But there's not a whole lot of them.
I know.
Dominicans are like that too.
It depends on the Dominicans.
But I mean, as far as their charism, though, education for sure.
Yes, yeah, but I think that's. But I think when what I've seen, and I think this is kind of validated in a lot of the studies and stuff, is the main issue has been there's been a change in charism. When you start seeing order declining, it's because they changed what they were originally doing. And that's causing problems.
Is it someone's job? Is there someone in Rome that's supposed to be working on this, or is it at the diocesan level, or or is it up to like
when it comes
to Judes of the world to go find all the Sacred Heart nuns?
So obviously, when it comes to the orders, they all owe obedience to the Holy Father, so they all owe obedience to Rome, of course. But there's a lot of autonomy within these orders. So, for instance, like we talked about in previous sessions when we talked about Archbishop Carlson, what his authority, where that lies, right? Mm-hmm. He has full autonomy within the boundaries here. That's the same thing for provincial of an order. And even in the microcosm, the different, like, I'm sorry, not of the general, but the provincials of those individual order. You have a general and provincial. The provincials have a lot of autonomy within their boundary too. And so if they're going off and doing something maybe that not necessarily would be in line with their history and their charism, well, who's supposed to be one to reform that? Well, technically it would be the general, go to the higher authority. But there's also arguments being made, well, we should be doing this because we need this now for survival. That's usually the argument. But that's a bad argument because in the history of the church, that's never been the problem, right? So, yeah, is it the question of who has really final say on this? Obviously, the Holy Father does, but also the Holy Father doesn't necessarily know what's going on in every different organization throughout the entire Catholic Church. And so part of this needs to be an understanding of, well, who are we as an order? What are we supposed to do? What were we founded on? And if we're not doing that, we should reform. And I think here's going to be the saving grace, I think, in all this. These orders are either going to reform or die. And then the things that are still being needed, new orders will come about from that. We've seen that recently, actually. There have been a lot of orders developed over the last 20, 30, since Vatican II, that have had these charisms that are necessary and good, and they're thriving. And praise God. But some of these older orders have been around, and they're not necessarily doing what they were originally called to do. You're seeing they're declining and dying. And so it's either reform or die. That's what you gotta do. Reformata Ecclesiae. The constantly reforming church. That's where you live in. And so that's...
A lot of people don't like that either because they don't like change.
Well, in this case, it's not even change. It's really going back to what you were doing originally. that's the whole point. It's like, well, okay, well, you were working in hospitals, and now you're actually over here working in the parish. Go back to that. If you go back to that, you'll start getting people attracted to it.
So what would motivate them to change their charism?
That's a great question. Like from original charism to a new charism?
Yeah, from education.
So I think part of that was, and again, this is all speculation, but I think part of that was like a different understanding of the spirit of Vatican II. So when Vatican II came out, there was a huge misinterpretation, which kind of caused a seismic shift in the way orders kind of ran themselves. And I think several orders thought, well, things are all changing now. We may have to start having married priests or whatever, so maybe we start getting ready for that. Part of it could be financial, right? Well, if we start getting into this, we can probably get a more money flow coming in for the order. So maybe we start looking at that. I think the reasons are legion, right? I don't know if it's necessarily just one reason. I think it could be many. But I think unfortunately it was just a lack of trust in what they were called to do. I think that's what a lot of this stems from, is that, well, God calls us to do this, and I don't know if He's calling us to do that anymore. Well, what would you make you say that? Well, they had this big change in Vatican II, and it seems like there's a market growing over here we want to tap into to help our order. Okay. Is that the best thing to do, though, for your order?
Yeah, it seems like external factors.
Oh, I would imagine it's all external factors, sure. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it's anything. I wouldn't even say it's anything nefarious. I think it's just kind of a lack of interpretation or understanding. That it's always been told. The church has always said when an order is founded, they're founded on the charism. And this actually, the sad thing about this has been all throughout history, that when an order changes their charism, they end up dying. This is nothing. That's nothing new. That's been around since we had orders back in the Benedictine times of the 8th century. So, but yeah, I think part of it, I think, also to like make yourself more relevant, right? Well, we want to. It could be. We want to get younger vocations. What are they into? Oh, they like social media. Okay, let's go there. Or maybe it's like, well, what's big right now needs the most help, and what's on the periphery of the society we need to go help. Well, let's go there. And that's good intention. There's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
But the question needs to be, well, is that something that another order should do? Should we develop a new order for that? Or should we go do that? And I think the church would always say the answer is you should develop a new order to go do that. Right? Unless you want to die, which, I mean, that's, that's the other thing too, right? I don't know. Yeah, it's unfortunate. It is unfortunate. But I think that's what I'm saying. I think that the same grace that these orders that are dying are going to reform back to what they should be doing. And they'll start surviving, or they're going to die out. And then new orders will come about. So either way, it's fine. Either way, it's good.
Well, some of this consolidation might help, at least at our level.
Well, that's
There'll be more people and there'll be more stewardship, more direct stewardship.
Well, the all things new
out.
is, again, we have to understand that's more of an archdiocesan level. And
Right.
Obviously the orders are going to be involved with that in some way. But they also have a lot to say what that happens with that from their perspective. Because, you could say, well, maybe, I mean, again, no one knows what's going to happen here. But with St. Anthony of Padua, well, how many people are coming to Mass there? 7. Okay, well, that's good. Maybe for the 7 people. Do we really need a whole parish dedicated to the Franciscan charism? Or could we be better managed from an archdiocesan standpoint and have maybe 3 archdiocesan priests there to go help and minister in those areas?
But aren't there 30 brothers there, or a friar there?
I don't know if that many.
We went on a retreat not too long ago over there, and I thought they said there was 30 of them.
Maybe they had some visiting.
It could be.
I don't know, but I mean,
So I'll tell you a story.
yeah.
So when I was on retreat at Seven Holy Founders, there's a priest here from Uganda who was getting his master's degree at SLU,
Mm-hmm.
Father Thomas. Long name about this.
Yeah, sure.
Father. So I picked him up today at St. Anthony of Padua
Yeah.
and took him to school. So there's a rotating thing.
Oh, nice.
Acts.
Gotcha.
People.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I asked him, I said, how did you end up here? So his explanation was, well, my bishop got a scholarship for me to come to SLU.
Mm-hmm.
And I was supposed to stay with the Jesuits.
Mm-hmm.
But they're building a new building,
Yeah.
residence hall or
Jesuit
whatever.
Hall is being done away with there, right?
Yeah.
And he said, so they didn't have room and they had room here for me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we ended up.
Yeah, but
Kind of interesting.
That's how we had Father Joseph here for so long,
Right.
right? I mean, they had no place to stay. We're like, here, you got a room here, so come on in. He had a scholarship to go to SLU. Great,
Right.
wonderful. That was quite often. I mean, the seminarians here. We have a lot of men who came from Africa and other countries because they have scholarships. They come here to further studies and they go off to become priests back to their hometown. Great. Yeah, that's common. But as far as like all things new and kind of the understanding of how that's going to play, yeah, the orders can I think the extent of their understanding will be, well, what are you currently doing, and what are the resources you can provide, and then maybe the decision about, well, how's that going to affect us in the long term. So, I don't know. I mean, there's certain orders, like I know the Marinists are not, even though they have Vianney and Chaminade and Our Lady of the Pillar, I don't know how many men they have
There's
here.
2 or 3 of them.
Yeah.
I think there's only 2 or 3 of you.
Right. And so part of the push, and this is something that's been kind of put out there, was there's a great desire to have archdiocesan priests in all high schools. And so how's that going to look? So maybe there wouldn't be needed for as many religious orders to be involved if we're having archdiocesan priests in the schools.
How much control, if any, does the Archbishop have over these?
Complete. Oh, well, okay. So here's
Jesuits and
yeah, good question.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, so the Archbishop, the extent of his authority is basically within the boundary, and all he can really do there is say whether you can come in or not. Right. So in reality, the Archbishop has the authority to kick the Jesuits out, bring them back in. He can do that.
You can't tell them what to do.
No, because that falls under the jurisdiction of the provincial of the order. So to that point, it'd be like maybe Father Fred, who's teaching theology at SLU, that's given him by the provincial. But the Archbishop can say, I don't want Father Fred in my diocese anymore, get him out. That's fine. That's well within his purview.
And they would have to move him out.
Yes.
Even though, are you talking about Father Fred's at the UI or is he at SLU?
SLU. So Father Fred is teaching theology at SLU University, or SLU High for that matter, whatever.
Yeah.
SLU, right. And the provincial says, okay, Father Fred, I want you to teach this course. Great. Archbishop says, I don't want him in my archdiocese anymore. Father Fred, you got to go. Right. That's kind of the interplay between the bishop and the provincial when it comes to these things. The bishop does have final say within his territory, but he can't necessarily tell that Jesuit what he can go do within the order. That's up to the provincial.
As much as I'm not a fan of the Jesuits as a whole, I hope to God they don't do anything to screw up the UI.
Well, I mean, here it's interesting. I was looking at this.
It could be my ignorance on how I don't know.
Well, here
from an outsider looking in.
I was doing some research because this came up. I'm the spiritual director for the Respect Life Apostolate here in St. Louis, and we had a finished discussion of the document of Humanae Vitae, right, which is Paul VI from 1967. And in context of that, we were looking at the backlash, for lack of a better word, that came from that. And one of the things that came from it was, I don't know if you guys have heard of the Land O'Lakes Conference. Has anyone heard of that? It's not a butter thing. It's just, so up in Wisconsin, apparently there's a mosquito-eaten patch of land on a lake where some heads of some very prominent universities met after Humanae Vitae was promulgated. And this was after, Vatican II was kind of already convened and, promulgating things from that too. And there was discussion about what the future of Catholic education from a higher education standpoint looks like in the future in the United States. What they got together basically and said was they declared full autonomy and separation from any ecclesiastical authorities in research, in doing things from a higher education standpoint. One of the heads was from St. Louis University. Now, what happened from there is you see a lack of Catholic identity in a lot of these universities. Right. And I think now you would see that most SLU more identifies as Jesuit than as Catholic. Now, we in the know would say, what's the difference? And should there be any? And the answer to that, of course, would be no. But it seems like there is. Right? So I think we're already kind of seeing that effect in some way today.
Good or bad. Yeah, and that's my only concern is I think the university sometimes has dug their own grave because all any university is going to have people from all kinds of walks of life, and I don't think SLU does a good enough job saying, oh, by the way, we're still a Jesuit university and we have roots in Catholicism.
And it's not just SLU. I think it's like I think the real problem is we're seeing this also. I think from a high school standpoint. I don't know if you guys realize this, but this was the first year in Catholic secondary education that we were not majority Catholic in high schools
because of COVID.
Maybe, but they were kind of trending that way anyway. When I first got here a couple years ago, 3 years ago almost.
Is it that long?
I know, right? Who would have thought? I went to Rosati Kane for a retreat to have mass there, and they were sophomores at the time, and half the class was not Catholic.
That's one of the issues why we steered away from that.
Yeah, but that trend has been going in Rosati Kane. Now I think half the school is not Catholic. Yeah. I think you're seeing that everywhere. And so I guess to that point, my thing is, if you're coming to a Catholic school, you'd expect to get a Catholic education. At some point in time, that seemed to have changed, the mindset has changed on that. To be more open, more welcoming, which, sure, okay, great. But you have to understand, if you're coming to St. Gabriel the Archangel or Christian Brothers College or St. Louis University High School or Priory, you're going to be taught the faith. Or at least you should be. And if you're not, that's a problem with you, not with the people coming to your school.
Right.
But I think that stems from, that's been kind of flowing down for a long time now.
They're like, so I coach at Luther North, and they make sure you
Yeah.
understand that.
Right. They should.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, right.
Because we have kids that we have Catholic kids, we have kids that say they're Christian,
Right.
and we have a whole gamut of them that are not Lutheran, but
Yeah.
you're going to be taught.
Yeah. And I think we have to start getting away from fear of trying to offend people, because here's the thing, you're coming here. You're paying to come here.
Right.
And this is what you're paying for. And if we're not communicating that well enough, then we should. And if people want to leave, okay. That's all right.
The caveats of all the prep schools that are like the sports meccas where kids come around, they make sure, hey, by the way, we're a sports mecca, but you're coming here to study Catholicism.
And I think that's what I'm saying. I think you've seen that landscape change here in St. Louis over time. Now I'm sure it's not just a St. Louis thing. This is what happens in St. Louis. We have a very large Catholic education system. So I think we're kind of an example for others. And I'm sure the same thing happens in New York and Los Angeles and everywhere else. We have Catholic education. But I think part of this is a fear, or at least maybe, I don't know if it's fear, but maybe it's just more of maybe it's a good faith approach to try to be more open. Okay, but I don't know if that's the good reason.
They're opening doors that they're not going to be able to shut
Right.
when they're going to need to shut them. That's the problem.
You know what the non-Catholics are at Gabe's?
It's a small percentage.
It's really small.
It's very small. I think it's probably like 5% maybe. It's not too big.
And they're city kids and they don't want them to go to city.
I mean, yeah, that's one of the advantages. I mean, COVID, I think, in some ways, it helped our Catholic education because every school's had wait lists.
Because they've been open.
Right. But also, too, to that point, I mean, in the city, where else are you going to go?
Okay.
You know, you pay a few $1,000s more, but you know you're going to get quality. But I think at that point, too, I mean, a lot of this stems from, if you look back over time, who were the people teaching in these schools? Religious orders,
Yeah.
right? And these were people that were trained in the faith, and not just trained in the faith, but trained in other things. They could actually integrate the faith into what they're teaching. And God bless our teachers; they do a phenomenal job, and I know it's a mission for them. It is a charism in a way for them too, but a lot of them don't have the theology to actually bring this into the classroom.
But granted, I was pretty clueless when I was here, I would argue. But I think my kids get a better understanding of what the Catholic Church is about than I got when I was here.
I hope so.
We had Sister Cream was the principal, Sister Mary was here, the music teacher was young nun. There was probably 7 or 8 nuns who lived over
Yeah,
there.
probably. Yeah.
And we had every bit of 5 or 6 priests here.
Yeah.
When I was at the Berg, I know there was 4 priests and probably 4 or 5 nuns. There's none over there now.
Yep. Yeah, it is unfortunate.
So, and when I was in high school, I know there's a ton of brothers at CBC, or maybe not a ton, but there was a lot more than that.
When I was at CBC, we had, I think, 10 brothers there, which was not bad.
Right.
And I think I at least had one brother teach me every year, which was great. Now there's none.
But there was the same thing at Vianney. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody of Marianists at Chaminade, but I could be wrong.
Well, maybe just because literally the pillars of their parish are right next door,
Right.
so maybe like they would. But I think now there's only 3 priests over there.
Right.
So, and that doesn't include Vianney,
Right.
So yeah, I mean, but that's what I'm saying. A lot of this is it's a lack of Catholic identity, but also there's a lack of catechesis, I think, in some ways, right? And I'm happy to hear that. I'm glad that the kids are getting a good Catholic experience here, and I hope they are.
There's a lot
I
of
would hope it would actually transfer more to people coming to mass on Sunday, but.
No, they'll just come home and they'll say X, Y, Z in
Mhm.
religion class. You know,
Mhm.
I didn't know the St. Michael's Prayer until I started coaching here, I think. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I only knew that because we say the rosary, my dad would add that on the end.
Right.
Yeah.
Are the teachers required to have any sort of Catholics, education courses?
Like certificates?
That way?
Yeah, I think there's like the theology teachers for sure,
No.
right? But I don't think like your average like science teacher would necessarily have to have that.
But
I
there's
think
an
there are,
expectation, like when I coached at the Berg, there's an expectation to be practicing the faith, 100%.
well, we have teachers who aren't even Catholic.
Oh, we do?
Yeah. So now they're not necessarily teaching religion.
Right.
They wouldn't be able to do that. But yeah, no, there's no real requirement for a teacher to have that, like the Catholic theology certificate, unless you're teaching theology. Now there's certain teachers that do bring their faith into these things, which is good, right? We have a lot of teachers over there that practice their faith and actually bring it into what they're teaching, whether it be social studies or science or math or whatever. Good, praise God. But that's not necessarily a requirement to do that. I mean, obviously, we would say you want to teach anything contrary to the faith. So I think there'd be a problem if that would happen.
So
But
I
to my
guess
knowledge, it hasn't
if
happened.
the kids are in mass and the teacher's not Catholic, then,
Well, at that point, I had an 8th grade teacher who was not Catholic, and she was a great teacher. She was a tough teacher. She was Lutheran. She would come to mass with us, wouldn't receive communion, but she would sit there with us and she would listen and she would participate as much as she could. And God bless her, So yeah, I mean, it can be done. Yeah, obviously it'd be nice if all our teachers were practicing their faith and they could actually bring that faith in. Yeah, it'd be great. But they do the best they can, and I think that's all we've really asked them to do for the most part. I think they do a good job for the most part too. So we got to be, we want to give them credit where credit is due. But I mean, that's the other thing too. You wouldn't expect them to have the same form of theology formation like that I would have,
Right.
Monsignor.
right.
Right? I mean, so yeah, of course.
Well, none of us have that.
Well,
I mean, come on.
well, that's what I'm saying, though. I mean, but it used to be back in the day that would be the case because a priest or a brother or sister would be the ones
Right.
teaching these classes.
Right.
So if someone had a question about, like, well, hey, how does this math apply to my faith? What are you talking? We can maybe talk about the language of God and how there's an order to things and how that kind of leads us to understand there's an orderer. And you can get into that kind of discussion if you have that theology background. But I wouldn't expect our teachers over here to have that conversation in math. Good.
I'm really kind of surprised that the teachers don't have to be Catholics that are teaching here.
I think that's been the case for a while now.
I think it's probably just they can't find them.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. I mean, and to be fair too, to teach in a Catholic school, you're probably taking a pay cut,
Yes.
Sure.
right? I mean,
Seeking
sure,
out.
yeah, right.
I don't think probably is the word.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You
I
are.
mean, so what that tells me is you want to do this, and so if there's the will, great. Now that doesn't mean there's not necessarily opportunity for evangelization and maybe even conversion, or at least deep understanding, maybe. But that's more falls on us than them in that respect, I think, too. So, like, I remember my 8th grade teacher. I don't know if anyone ever asked her if she ever thought about being Catholic, quite honestly. Maybe people were afraid to ask her. She was kind of intimidating. So, I mean, that could be a possibility. I'm not necessarily afraid to ask people that, though.
As you shouldn't,
Yeah.
as we all.
Yeah, right.
But I think that, like, some of the stuff I was thinking about last week, and just with everything going on, I almost think it's like there's a changing of the guard going on. I think the older priests were taught to sort of, I could be wrong, it's just my assumption, or what my observation is. I think the younger priests, the ones that have been recently ordained, have a different mindset, and they're trying to they're taught about stewardship and evangelism.
Sure.
And I think the other ones are, the older ones are, people get mad at them, but I almost think they're sort of trapped. They can't say certain things because they're on their way. It's like a guy who's pensioned. He's been in the union for 40 years and he's about to retire in a couple months and he just can't say anything because he's afraid he's going to get.
Well,
that's sort of, I honestly believe that.
I think here's my approach.
I see the pain on some of their face.
Well, I think my approach is more, I think, catechetical too. So one thing I'm very aware of, and this I knew this before I got in the seminary though too, that we're all products of the seminary we come from.
Okay.
So I say that meaning that, back in the time when, let's say, Monsignor Simon was in the seminary, there may have been a different approach as far as how they formed. They may have taken more of like a Kantian approach as far as like formation, which is really more kind of a cerebral aspect. When my time in the seminary was more based on Thomas, so it was Thomistic approach, right? Monsignor, they probably were looking at like some things like Karl Rahner, I mean some of these other more contemporary theologians. And so that's what they were teaching. Not necessarily bad, but they were all different. And so my formation in the seminary, these last, decade was markedly different than what Monsignor Simon received and what Monsignor Shamloff received. Not better, not worse, different. And so there's focus on different aspects in the seminary based on what may be going on in the times, maybe what would be necessary for the church in the future, or based on maybe lessons learned in the past. And so I think you hit on something there, Jamie, which is very true, that a lot of times you see there's a stark difference between the different priests coming out of the seminary at different times because that's the way they were formed. Right? Yeah. I mean, I think you mentioned this before, but a lot of people kind of get a double take that there wasn't a consistent seminary and instruction guidelines until 1997.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Yeah. So you're thinking about like there's 1900 years, maybe 1600 years, we had seminaries around. There hasn't been like a consistent, here's how you should go run your seminary until 1997.
And that's dictated by Rome?
That came from John Paul II. He wrote a pastoral letter called Pastor Dabo Vobis, I will give you shepherds. And from that came what they call a program for priestly formation. It's usually revised every 4 or 5 years. But primarily what the Holy Father, Saint John Paul II, promulgated was there are basically 4 dimensions to seminary formation. Primarily spiritual. Based on that comes human. Then based on that intellectual, and finally pastoral. But before 1997, that was never. Maybe some seminaries did that, maybe, but not across the board. Up until then, seminaries were kind of looked at as more their higher education place where people just learned to be a priest. That's where you got your education. Or it's more cerebral, right? Didn't necessarily worry about going out on apostolics or going out to the parish on the weekend because that's not important. Important is to study and know this stuff so you can actually go be a good priest. John Paul II kind of shifted that. Says no, all this is necessary to be a good priest. And then you start with your formation in the seminary.
I assume there's an office in Rome that looks after this.
The office, the dicastery for seminaries, or something like that. I mean, it's part of the office of priests. Falls under their jurisdiction. So there's dicastery in Rome that kind of reviews that. And, as a matter of fact, they send people out every so often to review this. Actually, this happened. This kind of what started this whole wave was back in the late '90s. After this came out, there was the Rome sent out these priests to go out and kind of review all the different seminaries throughout the world, and that's when they started finding a lot of these problems. Okay. So, as a matter of fact, I just got done reading a book, Goodbye, Good Men. You ever heard of that book?
I think so.
It's a good book. It was basically written right before, it was actually published right around the time where the sexual abuse crisis happened. It was kind of chronicling these things from seminarians and priests' perspective, what was happening in their own seminaries. And it kind of solidified a lot of the findings that came from this these reviews that are coming from the Vatican and calls for reformation in the seminaries. For good, which is good, obviously. It's like our online people bailed out on us, huh?
So,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you said the online person.
So when John Paul came out with that, do you call it encyclical?
I guess it wasn't encyclical. It was a pastoral letter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he has his thought, and then somebody writes this for him. Is that how that works?
I think he kind of wrote a lot of his own stuff, but yes. So I think a lot of popes have theologians. Like every I know cardinals have these. Usually the theologian would accompany the cardinals, like the different synods and the councils. Popes have the same thing. They have theologians they would refer to and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. Can you give me some? What did Thomas say about it, or what did Augustine say, or whatever? But I think the curious thing about John Paul II is I think he wrote all his own stuff.
Really?
And you can tell because the wording in it. It's all consistent, even before he was Pope. So, John Paul II, if you ever read anything by him, it's very beautiful, but it takes a lot to understand the point. You have to kind of boil things down a little bit with him in order to figure out what the point he's trying to make. He used a lot of
black and white, you mean?
No, he's not. He used a lot of flowery language, which is very beautiful and poetic, and because he comes from an acting background, so whatever.
Sure.
But you have to kind of really, okay, what is he actually trying to say here? And sometimes you have to go back maybe a couple times, and okay, here's the point he's trying to make with a lot of his writings. And usually, if you're doing that, that's authentically John Paul. Very rarely does it really shift in his writings from those aspects. So if you're reading anything like whether it be Evangelium Vitae or Pastoral or the Theology of the Body, you see the same characteristics, and so that indicates it was really him writing it and nobody else. Yeah. Benedict, I think, does the same thing. I don't think he has a lot of people write his stuff either. I think he wrote all his stuff as well.
He was in the news yesterday or today.
What was that?
Benedict was in the news yesterday.
Yeah. We'll see how that goes. I don't know.
Exactly.
There was some news that broke. I know it's been out for a while, but I think just
something
kind of
was said a couple weeks ago, but I didn't see.
Yeah,
It
there
was
was something about there was credible evidence that maybe he didn't handle some of the sexual abuse issues in Munich when he was the Archbishop there. And so there's been a lot of flack about he should have handled it better or whatever. And I guess I don't know. My tact when it comes to these things is we may never know who knew what, when, and for what reason. And I have a lot of sympathy for bishops, especially around when these things were going on, because I don't think anyone wants to admit or even maybe recognize that there's a problem, right? And also, when something seems kind of incredulous, usually you would fall back and say it is. But also, too, I think even bishops who are trying to handle the issue, forthcomingly and trying to actually, get in front of it, I think they relied a lot on maybe psychoanalysis, and some things that maybe weren't necessarily solidified in how they were approaching treatment. And there was a lot of trust that when the man goes through treatment, that they're taken care of, and they can. And plus, I need priests, so I need to put these men back into some kind of ministry, so I can actually use them, for lack of a better word, use them to their full extent. That's got to be a tough call.
Well, but a lot of what was happening too is they were also trying to protect the victims in their own right too, because a lot of the victims didn't want to be shamed. You know what I mean?
I think there's a lot of factors.
Every stance.
Yeah.
Whether it's at the Berg, they used to kick the girls out that got pregnant.
Right.
I'm like, that didn't make any sense to me.
Right.
And the guy got to stay, and then it was I didn't know what was going on here, and we had stuff here.
Yeah.
And we all speculate who the victims were, but we don't know.
Right.
But I know enough people that I grew up with. If they knew for sure who that victim was, that kid would be more of a victim.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's there's a lot of factors. And that's why I pray to God. I've never asked to be a bishop. The stuff that you know, not only them, but now the people, the thing you have to go through, the stuff you have to do, it's a thankless, horrible job. And I don't know if anyone in the right mind would want that job.
You get targeted from every direction.
Yes. And so I have a great deal of sympathy in that respect, because regardless of what Joseph Ratzinger knew when he was the Archbishop of Munich, what he didn't know, or what he would try to do, he tried to do. I think we can at least say that he tried to do something to help in some way or another. And you can say maybe he helped the wrong people, maybe he didn't do the right thing.
But it goes back.
I don't know.
It goes back to, like you said last week, the Archbishop has the autonomy here,
Right.
but someone has autonomy over that Archbishop.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And if he was being told X, Y, and Z,
well, I think that's the point I'm trying to make is I can understand if you have a man who's been accused of something, you want to help that person, and you say, okay, let's try to do some rehabilitation, and you're trusting the process, you're trusting what's being told, and if a psychiatrist or a psychoanalyst comes to you and says, you know what, I've worked with him, he should be fine, I think we're good to go. I would have no reason to say, well, no, that's not the case. Now, I think we're finding out now that when it comes to men who have these tendencies, it doesn't work as well.
no.
Right? And so now we know that, but I don't know if we can say that back in the 70s, 80s.
Because hindsight, sometimes people think it's 2020. And there's a lot of stuff that we believed was scientific or
Sure.
factual
Right.
or clinical 40 years ago that is completely debunked
Right.
or refined now.
Exactly. And so that's what I'm saying. You know, we talk about science, and you know, there's a lot to talk about that. You know, data can change, and data can show one or the other. Part of being a good scientist is being open to what the data tells you,
Right.
whether it's within your hypothesis or not. It's using that data to say, okay, what's the best solution now? And so I think a lot of these things were like, well, the science is telling us that these guys meant to be rehabilitated. Well, praise God, let's do that then. If we can do that, let's do that. And then it didn't work. And so now you could say, well, if a bishop should maybe, you know, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Okay, fine. But I don't know. It's so easy to condemn, like, so looking back 2020 in hindsight, but I have no idea what men were going through at that time, or what, you know, what was happening then, or anything else. You know, I think a good example of that is was Bishop Finn over in KCMO. I don't know who advised him, but he took a downfall, and maybe he just did it to be sacrificial and say, I'm going to fall on my sword so the next guy doesn't have to worry about it. I don't know, but there was no indication he did anything there that was wrong. Yet he still took the brunt of what happened.
Well, like a couple of years ago when they had that apology letter come out and they had to read it at Mass, I physically saw the pain on Monsignor's face, and there are people like, well, he could have condemned it right then. He can't condemn. He's handcuffed. And the one person was a police officer that said something to me, and I was just like, I mean, you can't come out against the chief. He goes, oh, I would. I go, well, you wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here it comes down like this. It's like, because, you know, men like Monsignors and other people before me, they lived through this.
Right.
They had friends that went through this. They had parishioners that went through this. And it can be devastating. And yeah, I would.
They
got
to deal with it like we deal with it. But I'm not the
Well,
brightest guy. I think a priest and a Monsignor that's been doing it for 40, 50 years, he don't get a pension if he basically tells the church to go to.
Well,
who's going to support him?
Well,
You get what I'm saying?
no, but to that
Is
point
there a
though,
pension?
the church has an obligation to
Oh, they do?
support
Okay,
them.
I don't know that. But
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't.
So here's I can come out tomorrow. Archbishop, you're watching. I don't mean this, but I come out tomorrow and say Archbishop Yancey's a jerk and I hate him and he's the worst bishop we ever had. They still have to provide for me.
That's why the St. Stanislaus guy sort of. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, now he may say, well, you know, Father, I'm going to put you down in Apple Creek now. So actually, we have this great mission for you over in Tanzania. I want you over there for a few years.
But I just think it may not be. I can come out and say something against my family.
Yeah.
Because I'll be fine.
Right.
Because I have it's like it's like these poor doctors, they can't say certain things,
Yeah.
whether they agree with it or have proof otherwise.
Yeah.
They're sort of,
Yeah, I mean, part of that is you have an obligation to maintain anonymity. You have an obligation to maintain the good character and the good name of people, even if you know that not to be a good name.
right.
And that's part of the struggle, you know. And I think, yeah, we have to all deal with it individually, but I think, you know, priests, they have to deal with it a different way too, because not only are they worried about themselves, but also their people.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't just say I'm going to deal with it my own way. I got to deal with it the best way that affects you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which means I may not be able to deal with it in a good way right now. That's the sacrificial life. That's what I've laid on my life to do. And I praise God in many ways. You know, looking back and personally, I'm like, God's blessing my life that I haven't had to deal with these things in that level of capacity. And I hope, please God, I hope I never do. But I have a lot of respect and a lot of love for guys like Monsignor who actually have lived through this and gone through what they've gone through and still say yes every day to being a priest. God bless them.
I almost created a war this morning, but I didn't.
What was that?
Someone went after him on Facebook today, and I was just like, I sort of agree with the people, but I don't agree with it the way they talked about him. So,
Well, and I think that's the important
Right.
thing is, you know, we have a lot of, that's one of the things about Facebook and social media is that people can be honest because there's anonymity.
right,
It takes a lot more courage, I think, to come and actually have a discussion.
right. Well, that was part of the beef.
Yeah.
And I was just like, stay in LA, man.
Yeah. But also, I think a lot of that same respect, sometimes that's how miscommunication, misinformation gets out, because, well, where are you hearing this from? You're saying this, but what is that based on?
Right.
Where do you get your information?
Right, and that's
Yeah.
the thing. Twitter.
And that's all, the struggle. That's one of the struggles now, going back to all things new, because, you know, I have nothing to report to you. And I understand. I will say it was.
And you're on the committee.
Well, so it's fascinating. You know, I've learned a lot in my time in formation in the seminary, and it's been interesting because, like, I've learned a lot from brother priests now when I was a seminarian. You know, when I first came to the seminary, I spent the summer at my home parish in Immaculate Heart of Mary with the priest there. He was a good priest, good man, and that's right the same year they closed the school. And so at the time, they were talking about what they were going to do with the school. They weren't really sure what was going to happen with the building. They had someone come in and start looking at the space to be used for more like a clinical research studies through St. Francis services. So not, you know, more like not like a methadone clinic, but more like kind of like, hey, here's some like services we can provide for like physicals and stuff like that for people who need it. A good opportunity. Wasn't really solidified what they were going to do, but at least there were some things talked about on the table. I remember one Sunday, the priest will remain nameless for his own good, I guess, or everyone else's. You probably can figure out who it is anyway, but still. He got up and was talking about in his homily about what they were planning to do and what the talks were going, and basically says, like, nothing's been solidified, but here's what's been produced. Nothing heinous, nothing that was going to be like, you know, drive anyone's property place down, whatever. Well, he's just so happened to leave that week to go on a vacation. And so I was the only one in the rectory. We started getting phone calls about all these, well, I'm going to talk to the alderman and make sure we get rezones, we can't do blah, 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 blah. And it was intense. The priest came back that week and was like, this is ridiculous.
It's a telephone game.
Well, what I learned from him, in that situation was, never put anything out there that could be concluded on, right? And I think that was a wise move, because I think he was trying to be transparent, and God bless him for doing that. But the problem is, we don't have a solid plan. People start jumping to conclusions, and that's what's been a struggle with this All Things New, because there has been a
Well,
solid
if you're too transparent, a lot of things can get speculated.
Correct.
And if you're not transparent enough, it's almost the same.
Exactly. And to that point, when I was stationed at St. James, my Theology 2 year, which is the same year they closed the school there, or at least they were planning to.
And what's the common denominator here?
Yeah, I know, right? I don't know. Something about that. Careful.
You need to get the heck out of here.
But,
We didn't say it worked. We didn't let it work.
well, to be fair, they didn't close the school while I was there. Let's be fair,
Self-incrimination.
it was either before I got there or after I got there, one of the two, right? But the thing about that I learned at St. James was, God, the struggle of being a pastor when it comes to these situations. Because, that year they were planning to close the school. The priest there was like, okay, but then he was given this huge donation to keep the school open for another year. And so it was funny, we're at my, every year in December we have these reviews, final reviews, right? And it was asking me in my review if I would have done something differently than what the pastor did. And I was like, that is a horrible question to ask me.
Right.
Because if I say yes, then that means that guy's a jerk. And if I say no, then I'm an idiot, right? Because here's the thing, the guy, I wasn't in the man's situation. I don't know if I would have taken the donation. But also, you'd be crucified if you didn't,
Sure.
right? So, because here's the thing, when it comes to donations, what canon law states is you have to use the donation for the intention of the donor. So if someone comes to me and says, or someone to Monsignor says, Monsignor, I want to give $1 million, but it has to go to a new parking structure. That's it. He can't use that money for anything other than the new parking structure. That's it.
Because he's a priest? Because that's one of our biggest arguments at the Berg.
Canon law.
So if I donate to the Berg and I say I only want this money to go to this, they have to follow canon law? Or because that's a bunch of laity over there,
Well, canon law is
Seems
the
like
law of the church. So,
It's going to split here.
It's not the law of the
Yeah.
school, though.
was that?
It's not the law of the school.
I was
Is the
always
school
told
part
the
of the church?
archdiocese gets their little. They always swear the archdiocese gets their little piece, and that's half our problem.
Well, so that's even kind of that's a debated question too, because canon law could also be particular law within a particular region. So this is universal, but there could be a particular canon law within dioceses that for any donation, the archdiocese gets a certain percentage of that. But regardless, the donation is still going towards whatever they're donating to. Now, if you say, here's $1 million,
You don't specify.
don't specify, okay, thank you for your donation, we love you.
So if I said I want $100,000 and I only want to go to landscaping.
Right.
So
That's
you're
going to
saying
landscaping.
if there's $1 million donation, the archdiocese gets their take.
All right, yeah.
That would be now that wouldn't be universal. That may be different for every diocese, but the diocese may have a stipulation in their own canon law, particular law here, that says any donation they take a percentage out. That could be. I don't know
Oh, you don't know
specifically.
that's
Right,
definitive.
specific,
Okay.
right. But I do know that every parish does pay a particular assessment.
Yes.
Right. Now, could you include those donations in an assessment? Right. So, yeah. Laws are made for generalities. Right? There are exceptions, of course.
That could be a numbers game,
It could be. Right?
for sure.
I mean, I would never advise anyone to not do anything against canon law or the laws of the church. But that's really important because, like in instance with St. James was, well, if the priest took that money, he had to use it for the school because that's what the donor wanted. Now he could say no, thank you, and then he'd probably be hoisted up on a pole and burned in the front lawn of the church.
So, but like, who enforces it? If he said, okay, great, I'll take it. Like St. Mary's got that anonymous donation, or some guy died in California and gave them money and they used it to whatever.
Yeah.
But who, is it up to
Well-
the Archbishop to go, you know what, you know in good faith that this guy said
Yeah.
we need to keep the...
He could. I mean, so he could. I mean, so if he knew, if he had
Because
evidence that they weren't doing
wasn't
that,
that an anonymous donation?
maybe. But again,
St.
the
James
question
was.
though is, well, the person that donated was anonymous, but it was clear what he was doing it for,
Yeah.
right?
So because you're a good Catholic pastor, you have to follow
Correct.
canon law.
Yeah, so it's not like there's gonna be like the Swiss Guard's not going to swoop down on you if you don't follow. Let's put it that way, right? They're going to take their Halliburtons and start poking you if you don't follow the law. But there is a force of law on that, and you could be actually excommunicated or brought up on clerical charges. Maybe lose your maybe be defrocked if you don't follow canon law.
So like a rich guy, if he wants to screw up this reduction of parishes, can't he just go around and go, hey, I'm going to give this much money? Because there's guys that have this much money.
Well, so that would assuming that finance is actually one of the criteria they're going to be looking at.
I just don't want anything to happen to these 7 churches.
Yeah.
And
that's what I'm saying. I mean, I think from my understanding, what we've seen so far, the concern is not necessarily how much money we're generating, how much money we have in the coffers.
how many butts in the seat?
It's more, not even that, it's more how are we actually bringing people closer to Jesus Christ. Now, granted, that's a little more intangible.
It's going to be very.
But that's also the job of the parish to actually present how they're doing that, right? So in a way, that leaves quite a bit open. But I don't think they're really looking more at the financials here. I think with the driving,
Well, that's got to be part of it, though.
I think it might be, but I think the driving force behind this is, here's how many priests we have,
Exactly.
and here's how many parishes we have open. Where do we need to put the priests that can be most effective in spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ?
I think one of the things they should do is we have a strong Acts community here, and obviously Paul and several people, and there's a whole group of people going to help all these other Acts community things. I think they should start challenging people with these larger parishes to take on more missions, like the St. Matthew's mission.
Sure. Now, but here's the repercussion of that. Well, great, no need a priest there then. Perfect. You guys are going to find your own evangelizing. You don't need a priest there. Perfect.
Well, I don't necessarily if I don't
No,
know.
so
I get it. I'm with
I'm
you.
playing devil's advocate. I'm
But,
just saying, you know.
So St. Anthony, say there's only 14 people go to Mass all week. Yeah,
Right.
Let's do our best to try to get those. Because what's going to happen is there's going to be Monsignor Bomarito's about to retire, and we
That's
can't
what this is
afford
about.
to upset what they've done at South City Catholic for the last 5 years as a church, in my opinion. That's just my ignorance looking at, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
St. Raphael's been small since the day I was born.
Right.
So why would you upset that apple cart?
So here's why South City is going to be a challenge unique in this
We
whole
kept
problem.
Magdalene open because half the people work at the diet.
Here's the thing, Jamie. In my opinion, it would be a crime to close the church like Our Lady of Sorrows, like St. Anthony of Padua, like St. Francis of Sales,
Right.
because we have these treasures here in this area.
They're unbelievable.
They're amazing. And that's what's going to cause a lot of discussion and a lot of consternation, and specifically here in the deanery, probably a little bit of a heartache.
But I'm not
Okay.
privy to every committee.
Define treasure. I don't get that. See,
Have you ever been to those churches?
Yes.
I have not been to Padua, but I've been to the others.
They
St. Anthony Padua was fun.
are beautiful. And what I'm saying is, it would be a
So the
sin.
facility itself is okay. Okay.
It would be incredibly hard, let's put it this way, to say we should no longer use those churches for the worship that's designed for it. Right?
Okay, and I've been to Sorrows. I have not been to Padua, and the third one.
The sales.
The sales. I have not been there. So
Basically any church in the downtown area.
But I
You
have
could probably
been,
say-
as an example, to what's the one right off of Hampton behind?
Epiphany.
No,
Joan
Joan
of
of Arc. I've been to Joan of Arc.
Yeah.
My opinion.
Yeah.
I don't want to upset anybody. That's pretty
Yeah.
Dull.
Cookie cutter.
Listen,
Right, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
pretty
Here's the-
bland.
All right.
Immaculate Heart, my home parish.
Oh, yeah.
Let's put it this way. I have a lot of other than baptism, all my sacraments have happened there. I had my very first mass I ever celebrated there. The people I know, a lot of people there, I love them. I wouldn't be, and I'm sorry for any Immaculate Heart people watching, but here's the thing. I would not be incredibly upset if that church were to close. I really wouldn't be. Because it's a box, it's a huge auditorium, you could probably do anything else with that area, with that space. And the windows are nice. I think the mural in the back is kind of nice. Other than that, there are really no other features of that particular church that lift my mind and soul to what's happening in the Mass. Sorry,
Understand.
right?
Sure.
There's a lot of churches like that in South City. But there are a lot also in South City that you would say it would be a sin to do anything with this other than a Catholic church.
But they're
We
only
allowed a lot
but
of
they're
the
only
really
a
nice
mile and a
work.
half apart. Right.
Right. But that's why it's a challenge, right?
Yeah.
That's why it's a challenge, Rich.
You redraw boundaries.
Right. And so maybe that might be the case. I don't know. But I will say, from what I've seen so far, it looks like we're going to be affected by this.
Well, I think in the city, big time.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Big time.
Define we.
Meaning the South City area. Our area. Now, what's going to happen here, particularly, is I don't know. I don't think we're in any trouble of folding or closing. Again, this is my just speculation. I don't know for sure, but I definitely could see something like a regional school happening out of this area,
Absolutely.
right?
That's basically what South City Catholic has become.
Right. And but I think I think you're going to see that maybe grow. Now, whether there's a combination of parishes here at St. Gabriel that maybe we make up, maybe, I don't know, Rayfields or General, I don't know. Will we remain St. Gabriel after that?
Well, that's part of that's where they actually sort of lost people. I felt with the Sorrows deal initially when they changed it to St. Catherine.
Well, here's the logic behind that.
To try to,
Well, 'cause like we saw what happened over at JP2, right?
Mhm.
If you maintain one of those names, someone's going to get upset.
Right.
Say it again, Vicky.
Someone else is there.
Okay. I mean, I'm going to mute you unless you have something to say.
Sorry, but
I'm sorry, Vicky. What are you saying?
I said it was an accident.
Oh, okay, all right, okay, no problem. We were just talking about your parish, actually, so it works out. Yeah, so I think the reason behind that is, the reason why the new name changed is because you're going to offend people.
Right.
And it's better to have a new identity altogether than to retain the old ones. So I know that was the logic behind what they did at JP2. And so if that were to happen here, I would imagine that would also be the same here.
A priest.
Well, we don't have any more room here anyway, do we?
Well, that's what I'm saying. If we were to see like a consolidation of, let's say, Rayfields, Joan of Arc, maybe Epiphany, maybe, but also too, could you maybe say like maybe even St. Michael's,
St. Michael's.
right? Okay,
Is St. Michael's considered part of our deanery?
it is not, but that also has been put out there that you don't necessarily have to maintain deanery boundaries. I think what they're primarily going to be looking at is demographics, right? So, how many of a particular culture in a particular area, or how many of a particular socioeconomic class are in a particular area, right? I think that's what they're going to be looking at to make those determinations, and that could cross deanery boundaries. We'll see. But I don't know. I mean, that's, again, I have no idea what's going to happen here, and that's why this is sort of a challenge, because there's a lot of different ways they could go, or they could do nothing. I don't think they're going to do nothing, but we really have no idea what it's going to look like at this point. Which is why it's important that people get involved and engage and get their opinion out there and get their let us know what you're looking for, what you want to see in the parish, and what we do well, so we can actually communicate that and make that part of their criteria.
He told me he'd excommunicate me if I told anybody else this, but I don't think he can do it anymore because he's gone. I met with Joe Vaccaro and Archbishop Carlson when he first got here about starting a Catholic school like they were going to do with St. Elizabeth's.
Oh yeah.
And he told me he'd excommunicate me if I told anybody, but what is he going to do now?
I'm sure
But
he's joking.
and I know he's joking, but I think they need to look into figuring out something like that. We just gave up billions of dollars to, and now they're leaving. So Epiphany's going to be empty again. So,
Oh yeah.
you know, and I'm not saying, you know, I would imagine we'd lose people here at Gabe's, but if you could take Sorrows or, you know, and turn it into some sort of, it's going to be crafted. You're going to have to craft it somehow. I'll, you know, take the religious aspect out of it, but have the religious values there, and that's what Stillman and the guys were doing with that all girls charter school. I don't even know where it's at, if it even got out. I know they opened it, but they were having problems with it. But I don't know. But it was a group of us from St. Elizabeth that was originally on the original committee. But it's money. It's easy money, but.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, I don't know. I really don't know how much of a factor money is going to play in all this. Quite honestly, I really don't. I don't know if it's going to be a really big factor or not. I from what I've been reading, what I've been seeing coming out from the Archbishop and the planning stuff has been, it may not really be as big of a factor when it comes to these planning changes.
Is he fairly conservative, or am I wrong?
Archbishop Rosansky?
Yeah.
I'd say he's probably middle of the road. I think he's probably pretty dead center for the most part with a lot of things. I mean, here's the other thing. I don't really know if anyone really knows him well enough to make a determination anyway. It's only been a little bit over a year now he's been here. I know from his past history, I think he's used to these type of things. I think we saw that happen a little bit in Springfield when he was there. I mean, he comes from Baltimore, and that was going through the same thing when he was there. So he's no stranger to these kind of consolidations, planning stuff. So if anything, he's probably a pro at it, which is good. That way you would hope he knows what he's doing. But my engagement with him has always been very good. I think he's a very jovial man. I find him very approachable. Yeah, I don't have any complaints against him, quite honestly.
So the consulting will gather all this data, and then whoever,
Yeah.
They just look at it, and he makes the ultimate decision, I guess. He and his.
Well, and that's the thing. I think yes and no. I think right now he's really taking everything into consideration. So
Sure, I get that.
I don't know who's making the final say. Obviously, technically, yes, he's making the final say.
But I mean,
sure.
you know how consultants are,
Right,
obviously.
right,
You're
right.
paying them all this damn money.
Right. Right.
And they say, okay, this is what you need to do.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
But if they're not part of this community, that's really tough.
And it is, and that's noticeable, right? Because a lot of these people, this company that we've consulted with, they have experience of doing this other places. But here's the thing: they don't yet have a final product anywhere either.
Right.
So that even kind of makes more question marks. And you look at places they have been, like in Pittsburgh and Columbus, and some. Well, hey, you know what? We're not Pittsburgh.
That's right.
And we're not Columbus.
They tout the Cincinnati thing too.
Right.
So.
Right. So I know what so yeah, that's hard because I think they tend to indicate sometimes what they've done, and that kind of maybe gives us an indication where they're going. Part of that I think is an understanding that there is no actual criteria, and that's what this whole program, since January 25th, that's what we're doing right now. And that's why they're coming to our parish, every parish at least twice, to have what they call listening sessions, determine, okay, what do you guys want to see? What are you doing well here? What are your advantages? What are something you need help with? And let's make those determinations. Now, just because something worked in Pittsburgh doesn't mean it's going to work here.
Right.
And I think they're aware of that.
Have
And I know that the Archbishop is aware of that too.
So they go to all these parishes? for listening sessions?
So I believe in the last communication they said they're going to 318 different listening sessions, which means it's 2 per parish. So they're on 300. Yeah, 380. I'm thinking 380.
I can assume that'll be well publicized.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would imagine.
I would hope.
Yeah.
I would hope, yeah, that's right.
No, I think we're planning to get as many people involved as possible.
You know what happens when you assume.
Right. That's true. But I think I think Monsignor is very aware and wants to make sure that we get as many voices as we can. So yeah, but I mean, from a newly ordained perspective, I think it's kind of exciting in some ways for my brothers who are fresh out of the seminary, but also kind of frightening because I think we're going to be dealing with the bulk of what the fallout from all this, whatever happens. Right, bad, right, wrong, or different, the men that are really in the position they are today are not going to be in the position they are 5 years from now.
You'll be a pastor somewhere. I'm sure.
Well, maybe. We'll see. I don't know.
Yes, you will deal with it.
Well, I don't know, but because this also raises some interesting questions too. So, like for instance, if we were to go to more like, let's say, what they call a spoke hub kind of parish environment, right? Well, you'd only have one pastor still. And it used to be back in the day that an associate was usually associate for like 15 years before they got a pastorship. So if they move more that direction, you may not have their own parish for another 15 years. I don't know. If we have less parishes, that means less pastorships. So
Yeah,
what's
but you
going to
can
happen?
still move as an associate though, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And
Be reassigned,
but I don't know what's going to happen. Are you hoping for that there, Richard? Is that a hope?
No, not at all.
I wouldn't blame you if it were.
Nah.
But no. And that's the thing. I mean, it's funny. You're kind of looking at the environment coming up. I mean, if we were in normal times, I would imagine that this summer might be time for me to move.
Yeah, but this is not a normal time.
Granted.
I thought everything was froze for a couple of years.
Okay, so
Is that a good
the
assumption?
moratorium applies for any
Oh.
financial changes
Ah.
as well as pastor movements.
But you're an associate pastor.
Yes, but I'm not a pastor. And I think that, and obviously that would be the case. I mean, look, we just had priests die, we have priests retire, so there's going to be places that are going to be moved
Yeah,
to, right?
right.
So it would be unreasonable to say that, well, yeah, your associate, you're going to stay there for 5 years. Okay. No, maybe not this. I mean, maybe not this summer. Maybe next. I don't know, right?
Right.
But if we were in somewhat of a normalcy period, this might be my last year, right?
Sure,
I don't know. I have no idea about that.
I get it.
Especially a good twist the arm of the Archbishop.
You want to go do that? John?
Assumption.
I don't know. He's a big guy though. It'd be hard to twist his arm.
He should go to Assumption. I moved to Assumption.
So should Matisse. Well, you got good people there
Is
though.
Father Ryan still there? I don't
No,
know.
he made the pass from Hillsborough.
Oh, did he? Okay.
So you have fire.
He's from down that way. isn't
Yeah, he was there, but now Father Bueller is the associate there. He's a good
he?
man.
They like him.
Oh,
He's a Rolla guy. Father Bueller. We actually it was a year ahead of him in Rolla. He was a comp sci and I was a mechanical engineer. And then also you have Father Keller, who is very good. Yeah, very good. But yeah, I don't know. But then they just made that change in August, so I don't think I'll be going there.
No, I'm just joking.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a new associate going to St. Joe Armagella coming up pretty soon. Father Chris Ruby's going from St. Joe, Manchester to Joe Armagella. So,
I think that's a good parish too.
Joe Armagella?
Yeah, I know, my only experience is with coaching against them.
Okay. Well, they had a big shake-up here recently. Father Skillman went to go discern with the Dominican, or no, the Carmelites, speaking of religious orders. I don't know if you guys know this, but also canon law says that if a priest discerns that they should go to higher orders, meaning go to religious order, the bishop has to let them do that.
Who has to?
Has to. But fortunately for us, Father Skillman came back after 30 days, and now he's senior associate at St. Patrick in Wentzville. So that was a fun 30-day retreat for him, I'm sure. I think he enjoyed it. It's pretty good.
Sounded like what Sean Payton was doing. He looked like he was just trying to get out.
You know, we have guys that never so often. The only one that I know of that actually has left in order to stay there so far has been Father Michael Hauser. He's with the Benedictines in Ireland, and he's apparently enjoying that. So praise God. He taught me patristics in the seminary. Brilliant man. He actually is the theologian for. We talk about theologians, right? He was a theologian for Cardinal Burke. So he basically followed Cardinal Burke around for a long time. Came back to St. Louis, taught at the seminary. Now he's I don't know if he's taken final vows with them or not, but it's been about 6 years. So, yeah.
So why was, like, I've never seen that before when Father Steve was here. How'd he end up here? You told me he was
So
assigned
Father
here.
Steve, so originally it was what Father Chris was here,
Mhm.
but then he was asked to go to the diplomatic corps, which left a huge gap here, and there was no one else to put.
Does the diocese like put a plea out to all the orders in?
They could. So they saw what happened. They asked, "Hey, you guys got anyone to come and just be here for certain things?" And maybe said Father Steve. Yeah. So, of course, that was supposed to be short term, and it was about a year, right? But before that, well, it was supposed to be Father Joseph Chang,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
and that didn't bode very well. And so when Father Chang got rejected, that's when we didn't have anyone to put,
Right.
and so that's how they had to go to Father Steve. Yeah. But I mean, in some ways, it's interesting because if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have been here either.
Right.
So I'm thankful for that in that respect.
I think Father Steve liked it here though.
Yeah, I think so.
He still come. He must like it here because
He always
he
goes to
come back to the cell every year. So.
Yeah, for a retreat.
For a retreat.
Oh, does he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't
He
know
was
that.
here this summer.
Oh,
He's
great.
done it for 2 years.
Oh, good. Okay. Oh, he was down to LaSalle. Oh,
Yeah, he was
oh.
at LaSalle last summer.
Okay.
In the middle of COVID,
Oh,
he
okay.
came back again.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
He's in Chicago now?
Yeah.
Is that where he is?
So yeah, I mean, it's just that's the way God works. I don't know. When it comes to these things, you never can tell. And I think also too, I don't think we were expecting Monsignor Simon to come. It was kind of a nice advantage that happened. I don't know if Monsignor Shamlofer knew that ahead of time. I don't know if I would be coming here. You know, but
If it's none of my business, say so. But other than saying masses, does Father Simon get involved in anything else?
confessions and masses. But,
Okay.
Yeah.
And as a retired priest, that's
Yep.
what he should. Okay.
Yep. He doesn't have to do it. Actually,
He doesn't have to do anything.
it's it's always a big question when it comes to in residence people, because the question is, what is their obligation, right? They're not canonically assigned, right? I'm canonically assigned here to St. Gabriel. The Archbishop said, you're going here, that's your assignment, that's what you're doing. When it comes in residence, part of that is just negotiation with the pastor, like what do you want me to do, and what can I do?
Did he sort of pick to come here then?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow, okay, that's interesting.
So, technically, if Monsignor Shamler's like, don't worry about anything, you're good, you just live here, whatever, that's it. But I think he looks at like doing mass and doing confessions as like kind of paying rent.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I think most people kind of do that. They're like, hey, I'll help you out where you need to, and I'll put me on the schedule, it's fine. And that's kind of how I pay my way. But it depends. Not everyone's like that either. There are certain people in residence who they don't really do anything for the parish, and that's just it. Okay. Depends.
Does a retired priest have to say mass every day?
As I stated before, you won't find anything in here. You won't find anything in here. You won't find anything in the catechism, any encyclical, anything written by any of the popes or the saints that dictates the priest has to celebrate Mass every day. However, I know who I am and what I've been ordained to do.
Right.
And so it's not that I have to, it's that I want to celebrate the Mass every day because that's who I am.
And that's something you have to come to terms with.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's kind of, in some ways, like, that kind of goes back to the discussion about, it's almost good that it's not written down. Because by writing it down, it cheapens it.
Right.
when someone has to be told what to do, that really kind of reduces the impact.
Well, you still have liturgy of the hour, though, right?
Yeah, but here's the thing about that too. When you make your vows, you promise to do that too.
Yes.
Nowhere in the vows do you promise to actually celebrate Mass every day.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah, but I'm a priest.
I understand.
So he's retired, does he still have to say the liturgy of the hours? Or not?
Yes.
Oh, he does?
Oh, retirement does not retire you from your vows.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right, yeah. So you're still a priest
I know
forever.
he's still a priest, you know.
You're
I
still a
get
priest
that.
forever.
Yeah.
And under the penalty of mortal
Melchizedek, right?
right, under the penalty of mortal sin, he still has to celebrate the liturgy of the hours every day. But here's the thing: you don't, under the penalty of sin, you don't have to celebrate Mass every day. So the obligation for Mass is the same for any other Christian or Catholic.
Yeah.
As long as I go to Mass on Sunday, I fulfill my obligation. But because of that identity, that character I'm getting in my ordination, I shouldn't have to be told to celebrate Mass every day.
So when you retire, that's just who you're going to be.
Yeah, you're a priest no matter what.
But if you decide to take Saturday off one day, do you is this something you would confess then, or you just have to?
What do you mean, like for liturgy of the hours?
No, for
Mass.
Mass. There's no.
If let's say I didn't have a Mass on Saturday morning or Saturday at all, I did not celebrate Mass at all on Saturday. No, it wouldn't be a matter of mortal of sin because I'm not sinning.
It's
I'm not,
just
but it would be like, why am I not? Right. That's more maybe
Your
more of
conscience,
a,
huh?
what's that?
Your conscience.
Well,
It's a
that's
Catholic
what I'm saying.
guilt.
I don't think it's necessarily a matter of conscience. I think it's just more a matter of like, this is who you are.
Catholic guilt, right?
Right? It's almost like not living up to who you actually are supposed to be.
But is this
Right.
discussed as you're going through your seminary, or is this something you've sort of brought on yourself?
No, I think we discuss it. I mean, so nowhere in our studies is it like, yeah, we talk about like the sacrament of holy orders, for instance, right? Yeah, we don't. I mean, said, yeah, look, you don't have to celebrate Mass every day. That's not something you make promises towards. It's not something that it's not a sin if you don't.
So like Bomarito, Monsignor Turek, and there's like 5 other of them, Dolan and all, they all went to seminary together.
Mm-hmm.
Either the same class or a
Right.
class
Yeah.
apart.
Mhm.
They're not going to sit around in retirement going, I know you didn't celebrate Mass.
I know. Well, here's the other thing too. Depending on the circumstances, I mean, I could celebrate Mass in my bed if I wanted to.
Oh,
Sure.
I mean, nobody can validate that I did or didn't. Right? But I would know. And I would not, and again, it wouldn't be a matter of the confessional maybe, but I definitely probably have some deep like, why am I not doing this?
Well, I remember like in Iraq and then when I was in the Navy too, I'd go to church every day,
Mhm.
and they'd like, how we don't have our church. Why the Catholic? I was just like, well, that's their deal, man.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I think it's good that it's not written down. Because that even kind of elevates the understanding of who you are as a priest. It's like for married people, you're never not married, right? Unless your spouse dies, of course. But as long as you're two together, you're never not married. As for a priest, you're never not a priest, ever, even after death. So the same way you would live your married life together with your spouse, the same way that a priest should live his married life with his spouse. Make sense?
Yep.
Good. All right.
Thank you.
Good. Well, that's an hour and a half. I think we can call it a day. Any other questions, comments, concerns, heresies?
Table that till next time.
Wonderful. All right. Thanks for coming, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.
Thank you.